Hello everyone, welcome to today's video. I hope you're all staying safe, hope you're staying indoors, and I hope you're keeping everyone nice and safe around you. Just a quick reminder, remember we're all in this together. It's not going to last forever, but we need you to do your part as well. Remembering the people who are looking after you at home, they're probably a little bit worried about some things now as well. So make sure now you're stepping up and you're doing everything you can to help everyone around you. So we're going to move on to lesson 5 today. We're going to carry on looking at Pope Urban's speech and what that meant and what we can really understand from the sources that we have available to us. So, like I say, this is lesson 5. In this lesson, this is what I'll be expecting you to complete by the end of the lesson. I want you to remind yourself of Pope Urban's speech. Really important. You should have done that in a lot of depth in the previous lesson, so you should really know what that speech is and remember some of the key words from there. I want you to reread the source and I want you to write a paragraph about the language being used. I want you to then look at 2 sources that I've got for you and then make some notes of what you can tell between the relationships. They're very different and you need to be recognising what they're different and why they tell us. Remembering to look at who wrote the source, where does it come from, what's the origin, what's the purpose, and that will help you understand a little bit more about what that source is telling you. Then I'm going to ask you to look at a website where you're going to look at some artefacts and then you're going to write a PE paragraph. These might be the other way around. It's up to you how you work through this on your slides. So first then, just a question, just a thinking question for you. Thinking about the word tone, you would have done this in English, where you need to bring the knowledge from other subjects into everything you do. So if we talk about that speech from yesterday, that Pope Urban II speech, what kind of tone do you think that speech shows? What do you think it is? What's the subject of it? Who was the audience? What do you think he wanted to achieve? How did he achieve it? Okay, and what do you think his attitude towards the Crusades or the Christians might be? So a bit of thinking time for you there. So you should now have remembered the speech. If not, you've looked back over it and just had a quick look at yesterday's work or your previous lesson's work, and then you're ready to move on. So I'm going to focus in on one paragraph of that speech, and that's the initial opening paragraph. Brothers, I speak as a messenger from God. Your fellow Christians in the East desperately need your help. The Saracens have attacked them and have pushed deep into Christian land. They are killing great numbers of Christians. They are destroying churches and land. In the name of God, I beg you all to drive out these foul creatures. So that was the first paragraph. Yesterday, in yesterday's lessons, you should have picked out that he was speaking through God. He talked about fellow Christians needing help, so that idea that we should be working together, that Christians should be working together. Remember, the Saracens was a medieval term for Muslim. It's saying that they're attacking people, they're killing great numbers, and they're destroying churches. So all of those things, remember, they're the key things from that paragraph. So what I want you to do, and this is a written answer, I want you to tell me, how does that extract, encourage peasants to become crusaders? Make a list of ideas. So in the initial one, I said you could write a paragraph. You're welcome to just write a list if you want. Think about the language, the tone, and the intended audience. So what words has he used? The language. What tone? How does that speech make you feel? And then who is it speaking to? So tell me, why would a peasant now go and fight in the Crusades? Make a little list for me. You can pause that while you're making that list, and then I'll move on. So on the next slide, I have 2 contrasting sources. And these sources, they're in that textbook that is online for you as well, the SHP textbook. Okay, these sources are completely different in how we would think of the relationship between Christians and Muslims. So if we look at source 13, again, this is from that speech persuading Christians to go on the first crusade. Okay, so our Christian brothers who live in the East urgently need your help. The Arabs have attacked them and have taken over Christian land. They've killed and captured many people and destroyed the churches. The Lord God appeals to you, soldiers and knights, rich and poor, to sweep our enemies in the lands of our Christian friends. So slightly different wording. You should be able to work out why you think that might be. We've got the dots here, so there are things that would have been in that middle, so we've summarised that source. But basically very similar to the source that we've already seen. Okay, we don't know who's written this source, so we know that it's an interpretation. So think about what that means and why there are some differences. But you can see very similar. When we look at this source here, this is from a Muslim trader from Spain who had travelled through the Middle East in the 1180s. So this is who had travelled through in the medieval period. So this is a contemporary source because it was from the person themselves. And they say, we travelled through many farms and villages whose lands are well farmed. The people are Muslims, but they live in comfort with the Europeans. Their houses belong to them and their property is unharmed. All the land, villages and farms stayed in the hands of the Muslims. The two sides understand each other completely. The men of war fight their war, but the people stay at peace. So slightly different, very different in tone, very different in language, very different in meaning. Let's just have a look at some things to make sure you understand. They spell Muslims very differently here. That's just Muslims. That's just how they would have spelled back in that period. So we're talking about Europe. We're talking about the Muslims and the Christians who were already living in Europe, in the Middle East. And we can tell from the tone of this, it's very different to what we'd said in the last slide. So here we've got this idea that they're still at peace, that although there are people fighting a war, the people there aren't fighting each other, okay? They are living at peace. They're unharmed. Their properties belong to them. Their land, their village, the farms have all stayed in their own hands. So this would suggest that when we went back to that original source, when they are killing many people, destroying the land, taking the land, that maybe that wasn't untrue. So you might need to ask yourself now, why do you think Pope Urban might have felt like he needed to lie about that? Why do you think Pope Urban or other Christians might want that message to not be seen because they would want them to believe this message? Okay, so what you're going to do for me now, if you can't print out, that's fine. What I want you to do is, if you can print out, you can just annotate like we do in class. If not, you can just make some notes around this. What impression do you get of the relationships between Muslims and Christians in the Middle Ages? Just think about words, just think about, don't write too much detail at this stage. It is a pen for writing, but it's just note taking. And then you would do the same here. They should be completely different, and you should be able to understand that by reading the two sources. So if you have a look, not on the next slide, but the next slide after that, I've just broken down. If you're finding that a little bit difficult to break down, you will see you have some, I've given you some help of some things that you could highlight to annotate, 4 of them, so not too much writing at all. And then the next one, which is negative relationships, I've got them here. Can you see I had a negative on the last one, I had a positive. So that should give you a little bit of a help as to what you can pick out. I don't want to go through those right now because hopefully some of you would pick those out without any help. Okay, so going back to here, now's time to annotate those 2 sources. And you can pause the video now and get on with your writing task. Okay, moving on. Hopefully you've done that and hopefully you've picked out some of those words. If I go through some of them for you, here are the positives. That this person was a Muslim trader. So whilst we're talking about Christian attitudes, This was a Muslim trader, so the fact that it was a Muslim source says that he had no reason to lie, did he? If he wanted he was just telling the truth. If he didn't want to do that, he might have been able to write things that made the Christians look like they were in the wrong. They live in comfort with the Europeans. That would be the Christians. That's what they mean here. Two sides understand each other and they're at peace. Lots of positives there. If you looked at your negatives, this is Pope Urban. He's persuading people to go to war. So if you're persuading people, you're going to have that. Do you remember we looked at a forest and all of those things, and one of them was exaggeration? You're going to exaggerate. You're going to use emotional language rather than just saying the facts. That's what makes an interpretation as well, really, because we don't know if that's really what he was thinking. Christian brothers, Lord God, sweep the enemies, Christian friends. Those things, okay, are positive, but positive between two Christians, all right? But they're negative because it's what persuaded people to attack. So, going back then, knowing all that you know, you should have broken that down. You should have lots of ideas already. What you're going to do now, you're going to do a full PEE answer, a full written PEE that ideally you would want to write, take a picture of, and send it to your teacher to look at. This is really important that whilst you're doing this home study, we're not there to help you. We're not there really to give that support that we would normally. We need to know that you're building up your PEEs really well, because this is going to be critical for you moving forward in Year 8 and Year 9 and onwards. In terms of content, whilst it's important, if you don't remember content, we can deal with that. But really the skill of writing a PEE is vital. So my advice to you would be to take a screenshot, send it to your teacher, and then they can give you a little bit of feedback. And then we can work out, because as an excellence team, we're getting together on your next units of work while we're home studying, so we know what we need to focus on. Okay, that's great. So here's your question, okay? Your question is, what do you believe the relationships were like between the Muslims and Christians in the Middle Ages? So you've got these two sources, you've got other sources on that SHP textbook on your files. You've also got a few other things you might have researched if you've done anything extra. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to tell me, what do you believe? Do you believe the relationships were good, positive, peaceful, or do you think the opposite? Because that's where you're going to start. So just by what you know at this moment in time, which would you sway to, positive or negative? This because here isn't a because for you to put lots of answers in. It's to put your general idea. So in Pegasus, we work on thesis statements. It's a very similar thing. So you might believe the relationships between Muslims and Christians in the Middle Ages were positive because there is evidence of peace. Okay? You're giving me quite a bit of information, then you could be even more general because there are sources to show this. If you want to be really general. What you don't want to do is put a long answer in here and then you'd have nothing left to write. And remember, we don't repeat. What you can do, if that's too difficult, leave out the because and just give me an answer. So what do you believe they were? First and foremost, don't say mixed at this stage because you're going to have a chance here to contrast. So just pick one of them to do in detail. So I'm going to pick negative, obviously, because it's the Crusades, okay? But if you think it's positive first and foremost, you would put that. I think they were negative because of the battles between the two religions. An example, this can be seen, this is supported by, remember you've got those key pages in your excellence books to help you with your conjunctions, with your sentence starters. You could use any of those. So I would say this is supported, okay? This is supported in source 13 where Pope Urban II is persuading Christians to go and fight. And then I would take out exactly the words from here that I believe. Not too many, just one simple phrase. Okay, it says, let's pick which one. The Lord appeals to you. Okay, I'm going to pick that out because that is the basis really, that belief in God, that belief a Christian would believe in, that relationship with God, that idea of sins. You also have loads in the full Pope Urban speech that you've got in your books. You don't have to just stick to these two. Okay, they're just there to help you if you wanted to. Now I'm going to tell them, so if I believe the relationship was negative, I'm using that as evidence. Okay, how, now I need to explain, how does my evidence tell me they were negative? How do the things I've picked out from the speech tell me they were negative? And remember, we try three, don't we? Try to do three things. So I would say this implies that. So say I've picked out have attacked them. This implies that they are doing something wrong to Christians and that there's already a conflict. So I'm going to talk all about that. Then I might extend it further. Also in the speech, it says, and I can add other things from the speech, like I say, use the full speech. There are lots of really good things in there when he calls them foul creatures and things like that. Okay, and you can build up that answer. When I look at Pope Urban's speech, what in there shows me there's a negative relationship, and give me everything you can. No repeating, okay, using those conjunctions. This tells us consequently, as a result, all of those things that we practice all of the time. Then, so here's your level, your flight path 4. One answer, one reason why would be your flight path 5. More detail is going to push those flight paths up. Now we're going up to our flight path 6, 7s and 8s with your contrast. Really easy to contrast in this. You've got two sources. So if I've said negative, then I'm going to pick this one out and I'm going to say, on the other hand, looking in source 17, it states that two sides understand each other completely. There's my point evidence. This tells me that some relationships were positive, and then tell me why understanding each other is positive. Tell me why people being at peace is positive. Tell me why nobody is unharmed is positive. And do as much as you can here in your explain. And that's how you're going to have a real detailed paragraph. This would be either one full paragraph, which would be a good 3/4 of a page with normal writing, or these could be 2 paragraphs depending on how much you're writing. No need for a thesis in this, no need for a conclusion. It's just one PEE answer that we need. So I hope that makes a little bit of sense. Just try and think, go back to the pattern. Make sure you're having a go at these sentence starters, or one that's very similar that you know works. Okay, so we've got one PEE there. So you can pause this now and then you can have a go at that PEE answer, or what you can do is keep going back and forth and keep adding to it. You can record, you can rewind and play this video. So, okay, so you could have paused it there. Alternatively, and you can do these in different orders, further on in the slides, you will see a website. And in this website, there are different types of sources from the medieval times that kind of bring the two relationships together. And there's lots of evidence that shows the kinds of relationships they had, but I don't want to give too much away because I need you to really think about it. So I put this at the slide as a watch and a thinking about. But what you can do, if you have already looked at this, you might want to use that in your PEE answer, which is why I put it here now. So you could either go on to write the PE and then look at this and just watch and think, Or you can do this slide first and then go back and do your PEE answer. Okay, so what I would have expected from this whole lesson from you, these can go in any order, but the rest of them you should be doing now. You should have completed them. You should know Pope Urban speech. You should know keywords and key phrases. Remember those, okay? If you don't, maybe write a few down and test yourself. You should have already written some of the idea about the tone, the audience, some of the keywords and the language being used in that speech. Just some notes there. Then you would have compared those two sources, and then, like I say, in any order, depending on what you wanted to do, you could have looked at the website to give you more information on the relationships, and then you PE, or do your PE and then just think about the website. Okay, remember what I said. Once you've done your PEE, try and send it to a teacher just to have a little look at, so we know where you are. Anyway, that's the end of that lesson, and I'll see you really soon. Bye.